Dr. Aghi, thank you very much for joining me, and let's dive straight into it. My first question, how have the Indian businesses who have a massive stake in American markets reacted to the additional 25% tariffs by the American administration in India?
Well, obviously not positive because the additional 25% and then 25% brings a sense of uncertainty in their planning and exports, and then their customer here. Because some exports, like garment, they operate on a very, very thin margins. So 50% does have an impact. But you have to understand one thing is that is the second tranche of 25% only will get effective by 27th of August. And we believe that there is a room to negotiate and bring that down to a level which is more palatable to both sides itself.
Right. Also, I would like to understand from you, going to the specifics, which are these sectors that are going to be heavily impacted due to tariffs, both for Indian businessmen and American investments?
Well, when you look at garment is obviously the big one. Then you have gem and jewelry, basically leather, handicrafts. They do compromise roughly almost, I would say, 25 to $28 billion worth of export. They will have an impact. What we are seeing is some of it is being absorbed by exporting companies. Others are being absorbed by the importing companies itself, the consumer itself. And so we will see some kind of adjustment. It will have an inflationary impact on those goods in the United States also. But it's more important to understand that what we are seeing is some kind of a discussion taking place between the two countries to see how to manage this so it does not disturb exports to United States. You have to understand, in February, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi basically jointly declared ambition to take the current trade from $200 billion to $500 billion. And I think the momentum is there. The exports to the US are going up by 15%. And what we are seeing is the imports from China are coming down. And the US companies are still looking at India as a China plus one destination to do their manufacturing. So I think we need to understand that while some of this declaration coming out from the White House do have an impact, we are trying to work behind the scenes to see we have a less impact on higher tariffs on the Indian exports to the US.
Absolutely. I would like to, delve into this issue and perhaps even get your perspective of what has been US President Donald Trump's strategy behind sanctioning India for buying Russian oil, but giving an additional 90-day reprieve to China, which is the largest importer of Russian oil.
Well, you have to understand it's very transactional. And what we have seen is that countries which cannot hit back are getting penalized much harsher than countries which can. China stopped all critical mineral exports to the US, and all the way from magnetics for the computers to the chips. It did have an impact. So I think what we are seeing is basically reluctance on part of the administration to go as aggressively on China than India. I mean, China buys more oil from Russia than India. China supplies a lot of equipment to Russia, circumventing all the sanctions which US put in. So I think you have to understand that there's no sense of, I call transparency is more about whom you can bully and move forward. In the case of India, we don't have much of a clout in regards to trying to penalize US from that perspective. So I think India has to basically finesse and manage this in a much different manner than China is.
Absolutely. Also, it's interesting to note that in the last week when US President Trump was questioned about whether he will sit on the negotiating table with India to hold those talks to culminate the bilateral trade agreement between both countries, he categorically refused to hold those talks. He said, unless India stops buying oil from Russia, that discussion will not move forward. How do you view this development?
Well, as I said, is that a lot of stuff's transactional. What we are seeing is that the purchase of Russian oil by the Indian state oil company is coming down, and that is sending a right message to the Trump administration. In the end, you have to understand that there are geopolitical play here. Indian market is critical for the US companies, both from a GCC perspective, both from market access perspective, and then also from manufacturing. So in the long term, it is difficult to ignore India and its market opportunity itself. So this is all negotiating ploy taking place, and more important is you have to understand the relationship. It's much deeper. It's not just White House to the government to government itself. It is business to business. It's people to people. India, US conduct more joint defense exercises than any other country in the world itself. So the relationship is much, much broader. And yes, one aspect of the relationship seems to be under stress point, but overall, we see that the partnership between the two countries continues in a very strong fashion.
Right, absolutely. And talking about, the main challenges that are inhibiting India and America to sign this trade deal, there have been a number of occasions issues raised about how India is bound to protect its agricultural sector, its dairy sector, its fisheries. Do you think there can be some sort of a negotiation that will bring both sides on the same table?
No, absolutely. I think you have to understand India has to protect the interest of its farmers. It has to protect the job. The objective of trades are always to create more jobs, and it has to be win-win. And you look at Europeans, in their deal with the US, they protected dairy market. So India also can. Yes, you can look at areas in the agriculture side, for example, soybean. We don't grow much soybean. We don't consume much soybean. So you can open that up. Lentils. India is the largest consumer of lentils in the world, and we import more from Canada, and we can shift that import from United States itself. So I think you can look at the agriculture side in a little more minuscule manner and see what is possible and what is not possible. Yes, you have to protect, for example, maize, wheat, and rice market from India perspective. So I think when you get into more detailed negotiation, you can find opportunities to collaborate and open markets for both countries itself.
Right, absolutely. And also talking about, the geopolitics and the developments that are taking place today in the world. We understand in just a few hours' time, the President Trump is going to be meeting President Putin in Alaska. That is, a lot of anticipation with regards to what comes out of that meeting. But also, there is the Foreign Affairs Minister of China who is visiting India next week. Their External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is traveling to Moscow next week. This is just a week after National Security Advisor of India, Ajit Doval, was in Moscow at the same time that Steve Witkoff, the American envoy, was traveling to Moscow as well and had a meeting with President Putin. The SEO summit that is happening in Tianjin in China, and this is the first time that in many years that the Indian Prime Minister will be headed to China to meet his Chinese counterpart, and of course there's going to be President Putin there at this point of time. A phone call that was made by the Brazilian President Lula da Silva urging India to further fortify its trade relationship with the country. Do you think Trump's tariffs are somewhere bringing BRICS nations and other parts of the world, other countries of the world closer together when it comes to trade relations?
Well, yes, I think basically countries are saying that if we are going to be dealt in a manner where overnight you'll change your trade policy or tariffs on us, that's not sustainable. Nations want predictability, they want transparency, and if you have a regime which basically changes the policy on a regular, untalked fashion, then it does have an impact on nations saying, hey, let's basically pivot to other areas. So what we are seeing is while every nation is relooking at its strategy with the United States, But at the other end, you have to understand, US still makes almost 26% of the global GDP. It is a vast market. And for India, this is a very critical market. But from a geopolitical perspective, you also have to understand China will never ever treat India as an equal partner. It has in the last the Pahalgam incident and the 4 day incident with Pakistan. It was the Chinese who were operating most of the technology behind the war with India itself. So I think while we can shift our discussion points with China or with Russia, but at the end of the day, U.S. becomes very critical both from an economic perspective, from a people-to-people perspective, and from a geopolitical perspective. So I think we'll have to, while we rearrange our deck, trying to look at China, Russia, and other big nations more, U.S. will play a critical role in the India's economic development as we move forward.
Okay, and talking about that, what do you think is going to be the future of India-US trade ties, bilateral ties, diplomatic relationship under US President Donald Trump?
Well, we do have stress points, and but I think that's normal. You look at U.S. has stress point with Canada, one of the closest ally, with EU, with Japan, with the South Korea. So I think we need to take this in stride and focus on what works for us and what does not work for us, recalibrate and move forward. I think getting emotional about some of these issues does not help. I think what we have to be very cold, calculated, and see what benefits India and move forward from that perspective. So I would say that yes, we will have some stress point, but it is also important to understand that with all the noise we're hearing, we have never seen President Trump once criticize the Prime Minister. He still calls him my friend. So there is a pathway where there could be basically adjustments and talks to see how we basically come back to the track and take this relationship to the next level. So I would say that there will be stress point, and this is with every country, and not only every country within the US. We are seeing that within the states with President Trump. So India is not an exception here. We just need to basically deal with it and move forward.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, I thank you, Dr. Mukesh Aghi, for speaking to us on Focal Length.